When you start modeling more complex objects in Maya, it may make sense to combine your objects into one. Now, many objects are comprised of multiple different parts, but those parts don't need to move or interact, and sometimes it's easier just to have one object. Now, this chair is a good example. Now, if we move this chair around the room, we're basically going to be moving the entire chair. Very rarely will we have to take the chair apart. So right now, this particular chair is comprised of a bunch of pieces. So if we look in the outliner here, we've got the arm, we've got the back of the chair, the base, the cushion, the legs, and so on. Now, if I wanted to, I could create a hierarchy based around, say, the base of that chair and have all these parts as separate, but I really don't need that because I'm just going to be treating this entire object as one chair in my projects. Now, if I want to combine multiple meshes, we can use what's called combine and separate, which is the opposite command. So I can select all my objects in the scene, and notice how they're selected in the outliner. And if we go into mesh, you'll see we have combine and separate. So I'm going to go ahead and combine these and watch what happens in the outliner. All of these objects now become references, and we have one piece of geometry that is called chair. Now it defaults to the last item that you had selected. So in this case, the left arm was the last object I had selected. But I can double click on this and change the name of this. So if I want to, I can just change it to chair. Now the thing about this is that it actually is still connected to these old parts. And so one of the things we may have to do with this is actually delete what's called history. Now, as Maya works, it does create history or a record of everything that it's done. And so if we go into the attribute editor here, you can see that we've got our chair, we've got our chair shape, and we have something called polyunite. Now, polyunite is basically our combine command. Now, if we want to, we can get rid of that by deleting what's called history. So if we go edit, delete by type, history, watch what happens to polyunite in the attribute editor. It goes away. And in the outliner, all of those other nodes go away. So now I've kind of collapsed my history, and now all I have is the chair. Now the chair still is separate geometry. It's just all combined into one object. Now if I wanted to, I could select parts of that chair. So one of the nice things about having objects that are combined and separated is that they still are separate in Maya. So if I right click over this and say select face mode, that selects all of these faces. But if I hit the greater than sign, that goes ahead and expands my selection. And when I've expanded my selection, now that object, you can see how it's basically still separate polygons, but it's all still one object to Maya. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Now I'm going to go back into object mode here. And if we have an object that has been combined, we can separate it as well. So I'm going to go back into the outliner so you can see what happens here. So we have just one chair. And if we go into mesh, instead of combine, we can also have separate. And when we separate, it basically takes apart anything that's not connected together. So when we separate this, notice how we get a group called chair, and then under that we get one surface per object that we had before. So combine and separate is a great way to kind of reduce your overhead in Maya and combine objects that will never be used apart from each other.